What is up, DS3TV? And we are back for another video. This is How Much is Mr. Krabs Worth by 10K Productions. Let me stop that. Okay, cool. But yeah, so we're in this right now. Yeah. I feel like this is gonna be a good video. I mean, I never really thought about it. How much is Mr. Krabs worth? I can't imagine a lot because he always talks about how close he is. He's going out to business. He always talks about how close he is to going out of business, or that he always needs the money that he's greedy for. So maybe he has a reason to be greedy. That's what I'm thinking. I don't know. I think it's probably under $1 million though. Put your guesses on what he makes in the comment section, and let's get into the video. Oh, and if you haven't noticed, yeah, I kind of took out my twist. They getting dreads, so yeah, that's gonna be fun. You might see those in a video next week or later this week. So yeah.
No! You'll never get a cent out of me!
Never.
I'd rather that word come in here right now and eat you all alive!
Let's just pause it. I already know, yeah. This was the vintage Mr. Krabs. Look at him.
There's a question that children have been wondering for the last the last nearly 20 years. That's
Yeah.
right, today we're talking about just how much Mr. Krabs, owner and proprietor of the Krusty Krab, is worth. Let's start by trying to explain a couple things right off the bat. Believe it or not,
Well, I say depending on when this video was made, shoot, it's about to be 21 because it came out in '99. So
the
yeah.
show's been on as long as SpongeBob, and they care so incredibly little about continuity, it makes this kind of difficult. So we'll be sort of cherry-picking certain events throughout the run of the show. And as we've seen throughout the series, Bikini Bottom seems to use dollars. So let's quickly look into where exactly Bikini Bottom is located. A popular theory is that Bikini Bottom is located somewhere in Bikini Atoll, and all the characters are some kind of radioactive creatures affected by the US's nuclear testing done there. This has, however, been more or less shot down by the voice of SpongeBob, with him stating that while Bikini Bottom was named for Bikini Atoll, the creatures definitely are not horribly radioactive monsters. So do we have any way to really prove just where it's actually located? Well, as a matter of fact, we do. Indulge me quickly as we travel back to the long-lost year of 2002. A different time when Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man was a good performance and Avril Lavigne was a relevant topic. A special time when Nickelodeon was airing a set of very special songs. One you may remember being Plankton's holiday hits.
You.
At the end of this, we see the
Wow, I haven't seen that in so long. Like, they just don't show it that much anymore.
majority of an address flash on the screen asking for the Krabby Patty formula to be mailed in as a payment for the CD. And right there, at the end, we see it. Bikini Bottom, USA. So anyways, now on to Mr. Krabs. Eugene Krabs was born November 30th, 1942. He was raised in poverty, not even knowing what money was when he was younger. Eventually, Krabs and his former friend Plankton create the recipe for what would become the Krabby Patty later in his life. We know that at some point, Mr. Krabs joins the Navy for several years.
Holy paste, what is that? That's the appetizer. But I thought you said you were the head chef on the SS Gourmet. Did I say that? No, I clean the bathrooms on the Gourmet. I was the head chef on the SS Diarrhea.
If he joins as soon as he turns 18 in 1960. There's also talk a few times through the series of Mr. Krabs having worked as a pirate at some time. Let's assume he worked for the Navy for 3 years before leaving to become a pirate. He would then spend the next 7 or so years as a pirate, making little to no actual money at the time. In fact, we know that he actually quits being a pirate and sells his pirate ship.
But I'll say, yeah, I mean, pirates, that's something that a lot of people do not know too. They did not make a lot of money because they were, they didn't make a lot of money and they didn't keep most of their fortunes because they had to, and they also didn't bury a lot of their fortunes. Because they had a lot of you wouldn't want to bury your fortune because you wouldn't want to forget it, right? Like, you wouldn't want to forget where you got your money, like, or when did you get your money. So that's how that would happen. But yeah, he was probably not getting any, like, almost little to none money for being a pirate.
Simply because he didn't feel as if he was making enough money. So now let's take a look at his pirate ship.
Of
We see
course.
that the ship has 2 masts, which means that the ship is not considered a sloop, which is just a ship with 1 mast. Doing some research, we can find out just how much a similar ship would be worth. With this, we can see that a recreation of Blackbeard's ship, Queen Anne's Revenge, would cost over $11 million.
11
Mr.
million?
Krabs' ship is smaller, we'll assume that the ship itself is worth around $8 million today. Going back once again to look at the ship, we
Makes
can see
sense.
that there are 13 cannons on one side, meaning 26 cannons total. A typical cannon can go for $22,000. That means we can add an additional $572,000 onto the $8 million for the ship. And
Yep.
as stated earlier, we know that he hasn't made much money, if any, during his tenure as a pirate, considering that's the entire reason he quits being a pirate in the first place.
And the reason why he's including that, I don't know if you guys know, because when you're talking about net worth, you're going to add everything into it. Like, you're going to add everything, like, I don't know, like the camera I'm using to shoot this video, or the, like the phone that I have, or, you're adding all of that together to make up how much you're worth. So that's how that's coming together.
So today, Mr. Krabs' ship will be worth a total of $8,572,000. But of course, we need to do some math to see just how much it would have been worth back in 1970. Doing that, we can see that Mr. Krabs would be able to sell his ship for $1,285,800. Now let's finally talk about the Rusty Krab.
Okay.
No, I didn't misspeak. Let's talk about the retirement home that would eventually become the Krusty Krab.
Yeah.
Judging by
yeah.
how many people we see outside the Krusty Krab, and the fact that we're pretty familiar with the building's layout, we can assume the building would only cost around $500,000 back in 1970. So we'll take that away from Mr. Krabs' total he received from the boat, which means coming out of 1970, Mr. Krabs has a total of $785,800 in his bank account. And now let's talk about bank accounts. In one
Yeah.
episode of SpongeBob, Mr. Krabs' mattress gets thrown away, and it's revealed that he actually keeps all his money tucked away there.
Yeah,
But
he does.
this directly contradicts several other episodes where we see Mr. Krabs sleeping on a hammock. This can just be chalked up to an inconsistency in the show, and as a result, we will be assuming that Mr. Krabs keeps his money in the bank. A surefire way to earn interest, something he would likely enjoy. Now let's move on to the actual business of the Krusty Krab. The easiest way to determine just how much Mr. Krabs is making per year is to see just how much he's made in total. We know that by Season 3's episode Clams, that Mr. Krabs has earned $1 million total.
Yeah.
His wording for this is very particular.
He said it's $1
This
million.
is $1 millionth dollar earned.
Yeah.
Not stolen, not scammed, earned.
But I'll say true SpongeBob fans remember that episode.
Mr. Krabs has made $1 million total off of the restaurant. Doing some math, we can see that in order to have done this, he would be making an average of $31,250 per year before taxes. This would also be taking into account the minuscule salaries he pays his employees. We'll also assume that Mr. Krabs, ever the cheapskate, is saving 80% of his money each year. So going off of that math, from the time Mr. Krab opens the Krusty Krab until 1990, Mr. Krabs would have $2,002,600.70 saved up. 1990 is a big year for Mr. Krabs. Pearl, his daughter, is born. The average parent spends around $13,000 per year on a child. Despite Mr. Krabs being incredibly cheap, we've seen several instances throughout the show of him spoiling his daughter to some extent.
He does.
So
kind
we'll
of,
be assuming he's spending around
But it's
$10,000 a year on his daughter. This is actually the last major change in Mr. Krabs' spending habits in the series. While we see him try and make extra money through some devious plans, he typically just ends up breaking even. Let's look at a couple examples of this. In Season 2, Mr. Krabs tricks SpongeBob into catching all the wild jellyfish to make jelly patties.
Yep,
Any
I remember
profit he
that.
would have made off this success goes into creating a factory to expedite the process, but the jellyfish is soon freed. In Season 6, Mr. Krabs tricks SpongeBob and Patrick into wrestling and winning a large sum of money, but they end up choosing to go to wrestling camp instead. In Season 7, Mr. Krabs uses Gary as a coin magnet and eventually begins basically stealing from people. However, he ends up in the hospital and uses all the money he's earned or stolen as a means to pay for the bill. There are a ton of other examples I could have used, but the fact remains that Mr. Krabs just isn't that good at getting away with his plans a lot of the time.
He's really not.
There's something we still haven't talked about with Mr. Krabs. His home.
I'm about to say,
The
how much
housing market in
does home
SpongeBob
cost?
is weird to say the least. We've seen at one time SpongeBob has bought his house, and then another time it just kind of grew. We know that there are realtors in the series, but I mean, Patrick lives under a rock. Literally. He has
Literally.
no income whatsoever, which means he has no way to pay for his house in any way, shape, or form.
Of course.
This tells me that in some cases, some citizens of Bikini Bottom just find a place and move in. Essentially just squatters. And weirdly enough, if someone squats for long enough and makes...
I always have wondered that because it's like like they don't pay taxes because Patrick obviously doesn't have a job, so it's like how is he able to, like to pay and afford his house, even though it is like just a rock. But I'm wondering like how was he able to like How was he able just to get like a big rock and just build basically like a home under that rock?
Significant improvements to the building are a lot. They could actually get legal possession of the property. This is something called adverse possession, and it's a really confusing legal gray area. But this honestly seems like something that Mr. Krabs would try to do. Considering that Mr. Krabs has been living in his anchor for the last roughly 40 years, he would likely be considered the owner of the property. So let's take a look at what his house has to offer. The right side of his house is Mr. Krabs' bedroom, the left side is Pearl's bedroom, and the second floor in the center is the master bathroom. The first floor contains the living room and kitchen. We've also seen that there is a basement, but we've also seen it look pretty different every time we've seen it.
Yeah.
And finally, to figure out how much his house would be worth, we need to figure out how many citizens there are in Bikini Bottom. Bikini Bottom has at times been portrayed as very large and other times portrayed as tiny. For instance, during the Pretty Patties episode, SpongeBob attracts 46,853 customers, and in another episode, we see a sign that says Bikini
Population
Bottom has 500
538.
residents.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is average the two numbers together and use that as a base for the population. The number we come out with is 23,677. A similar home in a similar market would go for around $79,000. But we also know that Mr. Krabs' house is extremely decorated and has a ton of furnishings. The average two-bedroom house is $37,172.39 in furnishings, but we'll take that up to $40,000 with what we've seen of Mr. Krabs' house. Now for the moment of truth. At the rate he was going, Mr. Krabs would have saved $5,258,025.13 in his bank account. His house would be worth $79,000 with $40,000 worth of furnishings. Now, the Krusty Krab would be worth a considerable amount more than it was originally bought for, considering it's the most popular restaurant in Bikini Bottom. We'll estimate around $4 million when we take rising land values and the estimated business worth. So now we add everything up and see that Mr. Krabs, as of 2018, is worth $9,377,025.13. Which is probably a good thing. That kind of money means Mr. Krabs and the Krusty Krab will stay in business a long, long time.
Yep. Alright, that was a good video. And alright, so just talk to you guys after the video like I always do. Yeah, I kinda didn't expect that. So 9 million? I kinda had to think that he had to break even though. Cause I mean honestly, his plans usually don't work out, but he usually does break even. I mean I feel like he will probably break even every year. Yeah, so I mean, come in the comment section with your theories and stuff. I want to hear them. I want to hear what you guys thought at the beginning, what he was going to make with, were you surprised at how much he made after? Talk to you guys later in the next video, and peace.